Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley here for EllenHutson.com and happy Satur-YAY. We are celebrating the weekend by getting our craft on, and today we're going to do a little hand stitching on this card featuring some products from Neat Tangled. And I absolutely love the way that this little cactus turned out. So we're starting out with some bright green cardstock, and I'm going to do a little clear embossing on this. So I've prepped the surface with a powder tool. Now I am inking up this receding background stamp from Neat Tangled, and I'm going to take my cardstock and press it right onto the stamp. I'm leaving the stamp on my surface, and you'll notice here that as I press this cardstock onto the stamp, it's transferring the ink, but I'm keeping one hand still and kind of pressing over the surface of the cardstock with my other hand to make sure that I get all of that ink transferred to the cardstock. Now, I used Versamark ink, which is a clear ink that's great for embossing, so you can't really see the pattern here. But as I sprinkle on this clear embossing powder, you're going to see it stick to that really fine pattern. Now, I'm sprinkling this all over the cardstock, and then I'm going to just tap off the excess. And I've done this over a coffee filter, and as much as I'm trying not to make a mess, I always end up making a mess. So I just cleaned up my little mess there. And then I heat set this with my heat tool. And I'll be able to tilt this in the light here, and you'll see that kind of raised, shiny, glossy pattern on my cardstock. So now that that's embossed, I am going to take this cactus stitching die, and this is from Neat Tangled, and I'm going to hold it in place in the center of this pattern using some Thermoweb purple tape. That's just going to ensure that I don't have this shift around when I send it through my die cutting machine, and that I'll have the center of the pattern in the center of the cactus. Not that it really matters that much, but I don't know. I needed to do it for me, okay? So once I get that run through my die cut machine, I'm gonna pop it out using my little pokey tool, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of ink blending just to the edges here. I'm using the lemongrass ink from Catherine Pooler. It's one of the very newest ink colors from the Catherine Pooler line. And I'm blending it on using this life-changing blending brush here. And I am doing that over a tonic easy clean mat just to make all of this cleanup really quick. Once I'm done blending with that brush, I'm just gonna take a baby wipe and wipe down my brush really well. And then I'm going to use that same baby wipe, and I'll clean up the surface that I was working on, and you're going to see how easy this just wipes off. And then I like to take just a dry microfiber cloth and just kind of rub my brush over that to remove a little bit of the extra moisture. There's not a ton of moisture in that baby wipe, but that's just how I like to do a quick cleaning on those life-changing blending brushes before I put them up to store. And if they need a more thorough cleaning, you can always take them to the sink and wash them with some warm water and some soap. So once again, I am inking up this receding background from Neat Tangled, and I'm using the Catherine Pooler Meant to Be ink, and I'm going to stamp this onto a panel of Neenah Solar White heavyweight cardstock, and this measures 4 by 5 1/4, so it's slightly smaller than an A2 size card. And this time, because I'm using a colored ink and I don't want to get colored ink on my hands, I covered that with a piece of scrap paper to kind of rub that ink onto the surface of that cardstock. So now that I have these pieces kind of ready to go, I'm going to start the stitching on my cactus. And I'm just using a tapestry needle here because they tend to be a little less sharp, and I tend to be a little more accident prone. And I'm just threading it with some embroidery floss. Now you're going to notice here that I'm using a coral colored embroidery floss, and I ended up hating it. So I spent my time completely stitching this and then ripping it out and redoing it with some green floss. But the good news is that you can really see what I'm doing with this coral colored embroidery floss. And I'm doing just a simple blanket stitch. So I'm coming up from the back and just pulling it through to the front, and then moving on to the next hole starting at the back and pulling my floss through to the front. Now you'll see that I secured that floss to the back of the cactus using a little bit of score tape, and that's just to keep it in place while I work my way around stitching. I just find that's easiest than trying to hold it in place or tie it in place. And when I finish my stitching as well, I am going to secure the other end of that floss with some more score tape on the back of my cactus, and then I'll just snip off the excess. Now that did take a little bit of time, but I just put on a YouTube video and watched a video while I was doing all of my stitching, and through the magic of television, it has been restitched with some lime green embroidery floss, if you'll see it over there to the left. So I'm working on my sentiment here. I have the Hello sentiment. This is from a Neat and Tangled stamp set. I believe it's called the Floral Frame stamp set, and it's just a really nice, simple hello greeting. I've stamped it onto some black cardstock using some Versamark ink, and then I added some white embossing powder and I heat set that. And I did prep the surface of my black cardstock with a powder tool prior to stamping. It's really important on these dark cardstocks that you prep your surface prior to using embossing powder, or you're going to have white embossing powder flecks everywhere. So now I'm just taking this, I'm trimming it down into a little banner end here by cutting a slit in the center, and then I'm cutting from each corner to that center slit, and that makes a little perfect fishtail there. You see, I also have some glitter cardstock ready to go. I'm going to adhere that just along the bottom of the sentiment banner that I've created. And then I'm going to trim off the excess. I love to use these thin little strips of glitter cardstock just to add a little bit of sparkle to my cards. I think they can make a big impact, and you don't need a ton of glitter cardstock to make an impact. Just that little bit goes a long way. Now I have some pattern paper here. This is from a Heidi Swap Color Fresh 6x6 pattern paper pad, and I just trimmed it off the bottom. And I put this along the side. Now this reminded me of a serape. And a serape is like a Mexican colorful blanket, and I thought this was the perfect accent along the side of this card. We just celebrated, when I am doing this voiceover, Cinco de Mayo, and we had a big thing at our church, and I am like totally into cacti and Mexican influence decor right now. I did a bunch of sombreros for the church party, and we had tacos, and it was absolutely fabulous. But I'm obsessed with that really colorful kind of Mexican infused vibe right now. So that's kind of, I think, where this card came from. So you saw me there. I just put my pattern paper on the edge of my stamped card front panel. I added my cactus on with a double layer of foam adhesive, and then I added my little sentiment strip over there to the right. And now I'm taking some natural colored embroidery floss, and I am securing it onto my cactus, kind of winding it around. And I'm just using a little bit of Lawn Fawn glue tube to hold this in place in little tiny areas of this floss, just to kind of keep it down. And once I get this secured, I'm going to tuck the end kind of behind the cactus here. And then I'm going to go in and I am going to add some of my favorite embellishments right now. And those are the Doodlebug heart sprinkles. They're rainbow heart sprinkles, and they're these mini hearts, and they are so colorful and so shiny, and I absolutely love them. Now, I've used all of the darker corally reddish pink color that comes on this little sheet here, so I think I need some more of those because I've been using them on so many projects. They go with so many things, and there's so many colors to choose from. But I just used the hot pink, the yellow, the blue. I used one green by my sentiment there. And once I got those secured on there, I also added some like gold foil confetti along the sides of this cactus as well. It just really gives me that fiesta vibe. So now I am taking a piece of minty, bluey, green cardstock here. It's cut to 4 1/4 by 11, and I've scored it at 5 1/2 to create a top folding A2 size card base. And once again, I'm going to bring in that receding background from Neat and Tangled. I'm inking it up with some Catherine Pooler Meant to Be ink, and then I'm going to stamp that onto my card base. Once again, I am just covering the back of this with some scrap paper to make sure I don't get any of that ink on my hands, because when I get it on my hands, I get it on my project, and that never makes me a happy girl. So once I have that stamped, I can add my card front onto my card base using a layer of foam adhesive. If you want this to be a little bit flatter, you can absolutely cut back on the foam adhesive, but I'm a girl who likes dimensions, so I add foam adhesive kind of whenever I can. And that completes my card for today, featuring some hand stitching on cardstock. This hand stitching technique is also very fun using some felt, but today I wanted to show you that you can do it on cardstock as well, or even pattern paper. And if you decide to do it with pattern paper, I would go ahead and back that pattern paper with a layer of cardstock to give it a little bit more weight and make it a little bit easier on yourself when you are doing your stitching. As always, I will have links to the featured products used in this project in the description at YouTube, but head on over to the ellenhutson.com blog post. Over there, you'll find more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies. Thanks for stopping by today. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you won't miss any of our paper crafting and card making video tutorials. As always, I'm so glad you stopped by and spent some time with me today. Thanks for watching. Happy Satur-YAY, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end. You know, if you've made it this far, you are one of my favorites. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, go ahead and click that button on the left side of the screen, and here's a couple more video tutorials I thought you might enjoy.